It started with the smell of concrete dust, wet earth, and the sharp, bitter scent of swamp rot curling into the air like smoke from a battle just lost. I stood at the edge of my ruined backyard, hands in my pockets, watching Karen from the horse scream at a city inspector. Behind her, her McMansion, once the neighborhood's beige crown jewel, sank another inch into the muck. Flash flood warnings hailed from police cruisers parked at the end of the street. Frogs croaked in what used to be driveways, and somewhere in the distance, a rusted mailbox floated by like a funeral barge. Yeah, that's me. You're probably wondering how the hell we got here. I never meant to start a war. All I wanted was a quiet place to sit after work, a little folding chair, a cold beer, and the sound of water trickling through the creek that ran behind my house. That skinny, winding thing wasn't just a patch of nature, it was peace. It was history. It was mine. But peace doesn't last long when people like Karen show up. The HOA had been a rumor, a thing that lived on the other side of the development. Rows of cookie-cutter houses, matching shutters, synchronized porch decorations, and a kind of Stepford smile paranoia that made the hairs on your neck rise. We were the old-timers. Our side of the neighborhood still had character, trees that grew crooked, yards that weren't measured in square feet, but in stories. My property backed up to a natural creek, been there long before me, and it was in my deed, carved into the bones of the land. But HOA letters have a way of creeping. Lines get redrawn. Jurisdictions shift like sand. One day you're free, and the next, you're getting notices from someone who thinks a clipboard gives them a crown. I met Karen Mitchell on a Saturday morning, so humid it made your coffee sweat. She marched up in pastel workout gear, clipboard clutched like a weapon. And that smile, God, that smile, the kind you'd see at a funeral. Right before someone asks if you're still paying off the mortgage. Hello, she chirped. I'm the community standards chair for the HOA. I blinked once, and I'm busy. Didn't stop her. She pointed at the creek, said it was an unauthorized water feature, a safety hazard, attracting dangerous wildlife. I stared at her like she just accused my backyard of being a terrorist cell. That's a creek, I said. It's been here for 100 years. It's on the deed. But she didn't care about the deed. Karen cared about aesthetics, about neighborhood cohesion, about rules, her rules. That was the beginning. 2 days later, I found a violation notice taped to my door like a scarlet letter. Accused of unsafe standing water, unauthorized landscaping, even frog attraction, whatever the hell that means. I ignored it, because some things don't deserve the dignity of a reply. A week later, second notice, this time with threats. $100 a day in fines unless I complied. I wrote back, quoting the county codes, attached land service, official stuff. Thought that'd be the end of it. Instead, they escalated. One morning, I spotted 3 strangers tiptoeing through my yard with tape measures, phones out like they were building a case for war crimes. Karen stood at the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, humming with smugness. That night I showed up to their stupid HOA meeting. Hadn't planned to. I'm not the speech kind. But something about seeing my creek on a slideshow circled in red like a tumor flicker. Switch. Karen called it a liability, cited mosquito risk, erosion threats, insurance dangers. I stood, spoke calmly. That's not a hazard. That's a drainage easement. She handed me a packet, told me I had 3 options. Fill in the creek, fence it, or submit to weekly inspections at my own expense. I told her politely where she could shove her packet. After that, it got dirty. I found rocks dumped in the creek, my mailbox knocked down, photos taken of my yard from an idling SUV across the street. And every day I sat by that creek, trimmed the reeds, kept the water flowing, held the line, until one morning, I heard the sound of a cement truck rumbling down the alley. At first, I thought they were patching potholes. Then I saw it backing slowly into my yard. A guy in a neon vest barking orders, another swinging the chute into place. I ran. Hey, what the hell are you doing? The guy barely glanced at me. Drainage mitigation project, approved by HOA. And then the concrete began to pour. Thick, gray, and wet like leather. It choked the water, buried the pebbles, drowned the reeds. Frogs leapt away, some didn't make it. I slipped in the mud, scraped my arm, shouted until my voice cracked. They didn't stop. By the time they left, my creek was gone, just a long, cold scar where something living used to be. Karen watched from the sidewalk. Smiling. And for the first time, I smiled back. Let her have this round. She thought the game was over. She didn't know it had only just begun. The first rain came like an apology. Thick drops tapping against my roof, whispering across the window glass. The sky had turned an aching gray, and I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the strip of dead concrete that now bisected my backyard. Normally, the creek would have handled it. It always had. Even in downpours, that winding ribbon of water swallowed the runoff like it was born for it, because it was. But concrete doesn't breathe. It doesn't bend. It doesn't listen. So when the rain came, it didn't disappear. It pooled. First in small puddles along the yard, then across the sidewalk, and by noon, the curb in front of my house was submerged in murky brown water. Mulch floated like drowned wood chips. Trash spun in eddies where the storm drains were choked with runoff. Across the street, Karen stood under an umbrella the size of a beach cabana, watching it all with her signature purslip disapproval. You could almost hear her thoughts through the drizzle. These people just don't maintain their properties. The thing was, I didn't lift a finger, didn't speak a word, didn't even flinch when the second storm rolled in a few days later, and Mrs. Jensen down the block found her basement full of waterlogged carpet. Mer Alvarez had to sandbag his front steps when a river of rainwater sluiced down his driveway. Maple Drive turned into a pond. 3 cars stalled. Kids waited barefoot, holding up their phones, and still, not one acknowledgement from the HOA. No apologies. No corrections. Just more notices. Homeowners failing to manage water runoff, improper grading, unkempt drainage pathways. It was like they'd erased the creek from their memories, like deleting a file they didn't want to admit ever existed. But I remembered, and more importantly, I documented. I didn't yell, didn't post, didn't rant at meetings or print flyers or launch lawsuits. I just watched and waited. With my old Nikon camera slung round my neck, I walked the neighborhood after each storm, snapped pictures. Drones flew overhead when the skies cleared, capturing aerial maps of the water's unnatural path to pooling. The backups, the soil erosion. I kept a notebook to dates, times, photos, notes about whose yards flooded first, which driveways were sinking, where the mold was starting to crawl up the siding. Karen never noticed. She was too busy sending out more violation letters. Too busy doubling down on her crusade to protect the integrity of the community. She even formed a new task force, flood mitigation and aesthetic compliance. Charming name. Sounded like a government program. In reality, it was just Karen and two of her yes men. Walking door to door with fresh inspection forms. I got my third violation on a Tuesday morning, contributing to neighborhood drainage instability. I laughed and filed it carefully in my growing binder of evidence, because this wasn't just about me anymore. The cracks were spreading literally and figuratively, retaining walls bowing, lawn sagging, tension building like pressure in a boiler room. Neighbors who once exchanged barbecue recipes now avoided eye contact. Whispers at the mailbox, shouts at HOA meetings, snide comments layered in fake smiles. People were starting to connect the dots. But not Karen. She thrived in the chaos. She strutted down the sidewalks in her oversized sunglasses and HOA badge like she was leading a parade, oblivious to the rot forming under her perfect little kingdom. She even knocked on my door one afternoon, waving a new set of documents in her manicured hand. "You are required," she said, voice syrupy and sharp, "to submit a full landscaping plan addressing your contribution to flooding by the end of the month." I asked, without blinking, should I include the concrete your crew dumped into my natural easement? She smiled, blinked once. "Any alterations to the drainage infrastructure will require further review." Of course, I signed the form with a grin and dropped it into my binder. Because, well, Karen believed she was winning. Tightening her grip, I knew what she couldn't see. The land was shifting. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. The water hadn't disappeared. It had just gone underground. I saw it in the low dip forming under Mr. Alvarez's retaining wall, the slight tilt of Mrs. Jensen's front steps, the never dry patch beneath the Henderson's mailbox. The water remembered, and the land was patient. So was I. See, while Karen played HOA dictator, I was playing a longer game. One afternoon, I opened the waterproof case I had buried beneath the old oak tree in my backyard, the one my grandfather planted in 1960. Inside was a blue folder wrapped in a Ziploc bag. The documents inside were older than I was. Original land service, a county certified letter from 1978 recognizing the creek as a protected drainage path. An official environmental easement etched into the very deed of my land. Karen had poured concrete into a watershed. She hadn't just broken rules, she had broken the law. But I wasn't ready to show my cards. Not yet. First, I needed the whole neighborhood to feel the weight. To understand what had been stolen. To know who had done it. The third storm arrived with a thunder that rattled windows and soaked the streets in Underan. And this time, the damage was undeniable. Lawns vanished beneath standing lakes. Garages flooded. Doors warped. Sidewalks cracked open like dry lips. And still, the HOA sent out inspection notices. They didn't see it. Not yet, but they would, because once water begins to rise, It doesn't politely knock on your front door. It seeps. It swells. It takes. And then it teachers. The night the power went out, Karen called the police on a 12-year-old boy. It was raining again. A slow, steady downpour that had turned lawns into lakes and backyards into swamps. I was inside, sipping black coffee in the dark, listening to frogs chorus from somewhere behind my garage. The storm had knocked the streetlights out, and with them, the last illusion of control this HOA had. That's when I heard the sirens. Two cruisers, lights cutting through the mist, neighbors peeking through blinds, and there, standing on her porch like a wet queen scolding the peasants, was Karen, arms flailing, shrieking about vandalism. The boy's crime, building a raft out of milk crates and floating it down what used to be a sidewalk. Karen claimed he was endangering property. She even tossed in the word terrorism for flair. 12 years old. The kid cried when the cops questioned him. His mom screamed at Karen. His dad threw a garden rake into the street. And I filmed everything from my second-story window. I captured it all: the patrol cars, the shouting, the camera flashes from neighbors. I uploaded the footage to a private folder, labeled it Exhibit 23. By now, I had hours of content: HOA abuses, water damage, neighbor testimonies whispered to me in driveways and over fences. I used to vote for her. One woman told me I thought she cared. She threatened to fine me if I put a sump pump in. Another man muttered, his basement wall bowed inward like the hull of a sinking ship. And all the while, the land kept speaking. One morning, I took a walk at dawn, boots crunching through waterlogged grass. I made my way to the far corner of Maple Drive, Karen's territory. Her castle. It was worse than I'd expected. Her flower beds were drowned. The mulch floated like soggy breadcrumbs. And at the rear of her property, where her pristine fence once ran straight and proud, the ground had caved. A sinkhole, not deep enough to swallow the house yet, but enough to make the back patio slant like a sinking cruise ship. She didn't know I was there. She never looked at the land. She only ever looked at herself. I ran tests. Quietly, I used a SIL probe on 3 adjacent homes. Each showed the same pattern: destabilization. The earth had been sponge-soaked from below, and the runoff that once flowed harmlessly down my creek had nowhere left to go. It was backing up through their foundations, through their pride. And all of it traced back to one decision: Karen's. Concrete. I prepared my next move like a general laying siege. I didn't need to attack. I needed to reveal, to expose. So I began with a letter. I slipped it anonymously into mailboxes. 1 page. Simple, no threats, no accusations. Just facts. A before and after photo of the creek. A legal excerpt from the 1978 easement. A list of observed flooding incidents tied to dates of rainfall. Bolded quote at the bottom: "You didn't flood your yard. Someone else did. And it wasn't Mother Nature." The neighborhood buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Karen denied everything. Of course she did. She sent out an official HOA newsletter, calling the letter misinformation, claimed it was written by a disgruntled homeowner trying to stir drama. She wasn't wrong. I was very disgruntled. And I was just getting started. Because soon after, I received a manila envelope in my mailbox, no return address. Inside, documents, a whistleblower. The envelope contained minutes from an HOA board meeting not made public, emails, approval forms, and the smoking gun and invoice from a concrete contractor showing that Karen had authorized the creek to be filled without a vote. It was unilateral. Illegal. Even under HOA rules. And it named her. Full signature, payment processed through HOA. Dues. She buried my creek with other people's money. That was the final piece. I bundled my evidence, photos, videos, witness accounts, legal easement documents, and that golden invoice and walked it down to the county environmental office. The clerk who took the file raised her eyebrows halfway through flipping it. This was a protected watershed, she said. I nodded. It was. Who filled it in? I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just handed her the last page. Karen's signature. By the time I walked out of that office, the storm wasn't over. It had just changed direction. The county inspector arrived without warning. No phone call, no notice. Just a white SUV with a faded blue seal and a clipboard resting on the dash. It pulled up in front of my house just before noon, while the heat from the morning rain still shimmered off the road like ghosts rising from asphalt. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, work boots, county badge clipped to her collar. She walked straight into my yard, crouched near where the concrete trench split the grass like a scar, and tapped it twice with a heavy metal rod. Talk, talk. She didn't even knock on my door. Didn't have to. I watched from inside, quiet, letting her do her job, because she wasn't just any inspector. Her name was Alice Monroe, senior hydrologist, Environmental Division, and her report wouldn't be written in pencil. It would be written in law. Across the street, Karen stepped outside, purse over one arm, a Tupperware of cookies in the other, her usual tactic. Sugar and charm. She marched over like she was still in control. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw the exchange. Karen smiled. Alice did in single quotes T. Karen gestured toward the yard, nodded, shrugged. Alice pointed, flipped a page on her clipboard, shook her head. Karen's smile faltered. Within 5 minutes, she was back on her porch. Within 10, Alice was ringing my doorbell. I opened the door. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask to come in. She just said, Mr. Dalton, do you have a few minutes to talk about your creek? We sat at the kitchen table. Rain pattered softly outside. Alice laid out the facts like a surgeon opening a chest cavity. The stream running through your property was part of a federally recognized watershed. According to county records, it had a Category C classification, moderate flow, high erosion risk. And this, she tapped a photograph I'd taken of the concrete slab. This violates multiple codes. Municipal, environmental, even criminal. I said nothing, just pushed the envelope across the table. The whistleblower packet. She took it, flipped it open. When she saw the invoice with Karen's name, she sat back, exhaled. You've been documenting this for months, I said. She nodded. Good, because you're not the only one affected. If this water displacement has reached municipal pipes or worse, septic connections, then we're looking at real damage, not just cosmetic. That's when I told her about the neighbors, about the mold, the rot, the basement flooding, and the angry parents. I even mentioned the raft kid. Alice scribbled it all down, fast, sharp, like she already knew where this Was going, I'll file the preliminary violation report today, she said. But this will trigger a full-scale investigation. She packed up her clipboard. Expect the county attorney's office to call. Then she paused at the door. You ever think of suing them? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Not yet, I said. But I've got a feeling Karen's going to beat me to the courtroom. By the time the official notice hit, the whole neighborhood had changed. Yards still flooded. Mailboxes still leaned like drunks. But now, something had shifted. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The tense, nervous kind. Like the pause between thunder and lightning. The kind that settles over a crowd before a verdict is read. Neighbors stopped waving. They whispered instead. Sidewalk conversations ended abruptly when someone walked past. Trash cans stayed on the curb 2 days longer than normal. Karen. She was nowhere. Her usual morning patrols vanished. The newsletter stopped. Even the horror website went dark for a week. Then, like a ghost summoned from her lair, she reappeared flanked by men in suits. Lawyers. They showed up at my doorstep with a cease and desist letter. Your claims are defamatory, the taller one said. You've been spreading unverified accusations against our client, Miss Jacobs, and attempting to undermine the governing body of this HOA. I took the letter, skimmed it. I'm not spreading anything. I said, the water is. He blinked. Excuse me. I stepped aside and pointed past my living room toward the backyard. Through the glass doors, they could see it. The sinkhole. It had grown overnight. The fence at the back of Karen's yard now dipped almost 3 feet. Her gazebo sag at one corner. A planter box floated in a pool that hadn't existed last summer. The suits said nothing. I handed them a copy of Alice Munro's preliminary violation report, already signed and time-stamped by the county. If Karen wants to sue me, I said, she better do it quick, because soon the state will be suing her. They left without another word. That night, I got my first call from another neighbor, then another, then 5 more by morning. Mrs. Jensen, Mr. Alvarez, the Hendersons, even Carol, who once reported me for painting my shutters non-approved taupe. They all wanted the same thing. Help. I walked them through it, gave them copies of the environmental codes, helped them file their own complaints with the county, suggested they speak with an environmental lawyer one I'd quietly reached out to weeks ago. What started as silence turned into a quiet uprising. One neighbor dug up his HOA dues receipts and found that they'd spiked 30% the month the concrete was poured. Another found emails where Karen dismissed concerns as community paranoia. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood had stopped paying their dues. The HOA meeting scheduled for Thursday canceled. Karen never showed up. The office lights stayed dark. The sign on the clubhouse door said under investigation. And the best part, the land was still speaking. A week later, county trucks arrived. Big ones, orange cones, survey equipment, engineers with rolled-up maps and serious faces. They weren't there to fix anything, not yet. They were there to assess. To calculate the cost, because someone had to pay for the damage. And the paper trail led only one place, to the woman who tried to bury a creek and bury me along with it. There's something poetic about karma. It doesn't rush, it waits. Like water. It finds the cracks, seeps in, and slowly brings everything down. By the time the official violation notice hit every mailbox, Karen's kingdom had turned against her. The document wasn't subtle. It had the county seal, legal language, and a single damning line in bold: unpermitted alteration of a watercourse. Section 30.4.0 of the Environmental Code. The penalty: fines, restoration, possible civil liability. But money wasn't the real weight here. It was blame, and Karen had no one left to share it with. The board scattered. The vice chair moved to Arizona. The treasurer lawyered up. The HOA secretary stopped answering her door. I watched it all from the same porch where I used to wave at neighbors who once reported me for leaving my trash bin out past noon. Now they waved back, with apology in their eyes. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because I'd learned something over those months of watching and documenting and waiting. People like Karen don't go down quietly. They spin. They twist. They blame. And that's exactly what she tried next. She held a community forum in her driveway. Full chairs, lemonade, a bullhorn that made her voice crackle like static. Only a dozen neighbors showed up. Most of them didn't sit. Karen stood on a plastic crate and started her speech with tears in her eyes. I did what I thought was best, she said. The creek was a liability. Children could fall in. Mosquitoes, mold, snakes. I did this too. Protect us. The word us landed like a slap. She clutched a thick binder, waving it as if it were a holy book. These are the letters I received. The complaints, the calls. You all wanted something done. I just took initiative. A voice from the crowd shouted back, "You took our money." Another, "You didn't ask anyone." Karen's voice rose. I was the whore. I had a duty. And that's when I stepped forward. I wasn't planning to, but my legs carried me anyway, slow and sure, like something inside had waited long enough. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bring evidence or charts or quotes from the law. I just pointed to the street, where the county trucks were marking sewer lines. You filled in a natural waterway without permits, I said. And now your neighbors' homes are sinking. She turned to me, eyes burning. This is your fault. You incited this. You turned everyone against me. No, I said, you did that. I just hit record. The forum ended without applause. Karen left first, her face red, jaw locked. She didn't speak to anyone. The binder she waved. She left it behind. I picked it up, flipped through it. Inside were letters, mostly printouts of old emails and handwritten notes from years ago, complaints about weeds, about kids riding bikes, about water attracting mosquitoes. But none asked for the creek to be filled. None gave her permission. And taped to the inside cover was a sticky note in her handwriting. Take control before the neighborhood terms. It already had. By now, the county had finished its survey. The report was public and devastating. Restoring the creek would take tens of thousands of dollars, not just to remove the concrete but to undo the damage caused by diverting water flow. They'd need to excavate, reseed, regrade, rebuild storm drains, and test for mold spore contamination in nearby basements. And here's the part Karen hadn't prepared for, the liability clause, because the HOA had authorized the work without proper procedure. They were financially responsible. But since the HOA's budget came from homeowner dues and those dues were now being withheld due to mismanagement, The liability fell directly on Karen. Not in theory, not in gossip. In court, the county filed a civil suit. Karen was named personally, and as word spread, more neighbors followed, joining a class action led by that environmental lawyer I'd spoken to months earlier. We weren't suing for revenge. We were suing for damage, basement repairs, lost home value, rotting drywall, medical bills for mold-related illness, children with rashes, adults with coughs that never seemed to go away. One man submitted receipts for over $14,000 in dehumidifier purchases and sump pump installations. Another brought pictures of his daughter's asthma medication beside a cracked foundation. Karen tried to fight. She hired new lawyers. Claimed she acted under emergency circumstances. She tried to invoke qualified immunity as a board chair. She even tried blaming the contractor, the same one whose invoice bore her signature. The judge wasn't impressed, and I sat in the back row of every hearing, never spoke, never looked at her. Just listened, because this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about restoration. Of land, of trust, of something deeper. After months of silence, one final meeting was scheduled. Not a court hearing, not an HOA gathering, a neighborhood vote. To disband the horror entirely. To replace it with a voluntary council of homeowners, transparent, accountable, bound by actual community consent, not the whims of a power-hungry tyrant. The vote passed, not by a slim margin. By every single ballot. Even Karen's house was counted, her vote marked absent. She didn't show, didn't respond. Her car hadn't moved in days. Rumors said she was selling. Others said she was staying to appeal the suit. I didn't care, because for the first time in years, the land was breathing again, and soon, the creek would too. They began removing the concrete in late spring. Big orange machines rolled into the neighborhood like slow-moving beasts, backhoes with jaws that snapped up broken slabs. Dump trucks rumbling down streets that used to host quiet evening walks. What had taken Karen a weekend to destroy would take 6 weeks to repair. I stood by the edge of my yard the morning they broke ground. A young contractor gave me a polite nod before dropping the excavator claw like a fist into the trench. The first chunk came out with a deep, cracking groan. The earth almost sighed behind me. Neighbors lined the sidewalk, arms folded, coffee, cups in hand, their silence no longer fearful, but reverent. This wasn't just construction. It was resurrection. The restoration crew moved carefully, following the old path of the stream as revealed by archived topography maps. Every foot of soil examined, every turn respected. I saw it happening in real time. The water started to flow again. The stench of algae began to fade. Birds returned. Frogs croaked from muddy corners. Even the mosquitoes seemed to migrate somewhere else, like nature was rebooting the system. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered broken PVC pipes, misaligned drains, rusted sump pumps that Karen had ordered buried, still humming beneath plastic tarp. The environmental engineer overseeing the job shook his head at it all. It's like someone tried to pave over a lung, he muttered. And the more they uncovered, the more damning the evidence became. Every new foot of pipe proved that the whore hadn't just been careless, they'd been deliberate. This wasn't ignorance. This was cover up. And with every revelation, Karen's case grew weaker. Her lawyers withdrew 2 weeks later. No warning, no press. Just a filing with the court stating a reconcilable conflict of interest. The day after, her house went up for sale. But nobody bought it. Not because of the price, because of the history. It sat on land that still hadn't healed. Its foundation still showed signs of water damage. Its basement had black stains that no bleach could scrub away. The real estate agent eventually pulled the listing, citing reputational damage beyond repair. Karen disappeared soon after. Some said she moved out of state. Others claimed she changed her name. Me, I never needed to know, because even if she vanished from maps, the imprint of what she'd done remained burned into the neighborhood's memory. Like flood rings on a basement wall, I thought that would be the end of it. But the creek had one more gift. It was uncovered about 3 feet beneath the last slabber wooden stake, half rotted, with faded lettering barely visible beneath the mud. We brushed it off with care. The contractor handed it to me. That you might want this. I turned it over. The ink was almost gone, but enough of it remained. It read, Dalton Farm, Estate, 1919. Waterline marker. My grandfather's marker, 100 years old. Proof that long before HOA letters, or Karen, or cookie cutter fences, this land had roots, and this creek had been its lifeblood. I wiped the mud from the letters and stood quietly as the stream began to flow beneath my feet, clean, alive, reborn. That night, I didn't sleep, not because of worry, because of peace. The kind that settles in when justice doesn't need to raise its voice, when the land reclaims what was stolen, when the ghosts go quiet. Outside, the frogs sing, the water whispered. And somewhere upstream, under starlight, the same stream that Karen tried to silence, sang again, a lullaby written in patience, a song of return. Summer came, and with it, the rain. Real rain, not the flash storms or gutter bursts we'd grown used to. This was the slow, steady kind that nourishes, the kind that makes leaves unfurl and turns dust to perfume. And this time, the water had somewhere to go. The creek reborn, ray-shaped, and finally free welcomed it. No flooding, no backups. Just the quiet rhythm of flow, winding its way down the channel like it always had, before the horror ever laid hands on it. I stood at my porch window and watched the rain for hours, not as a threat, but as a promise. The community changed too. We were no longer just residents. We were neighbors again. People started waving at each other. Real waves. Conversations returned. Kids rode bikes through the cul-de-sac again without someone yelling about helmet violations. The voluntary council, the one we voted in after dissolving the horror, held its first meeting under a large oak tree by the restored stream. No suits, no podiums, just folding chairs and clipboards. And the sound of water nearby. They asked me to speak. I said no at first, but something inside nudged me. So I stood up, cleared my throat, and spoke not as a victim, but as a witness to everyone here. I began, this isn't just about fixing a mistake. It's about remembering who we were before fear made us quiet, before power made us small. I held out the waterline marker, the one they found during the excavation. This was planted by my grandfather, long before fences, before concrete, when water flowed freely. Because people respected the land, I let that settle. Then added, We don't just inherit property. We inherit responsibility. There was no applause, only nods and that was more powerful than any cheer. Weeks passed, then months. And something unexpected happened. Nature started repairing faster than expected. The grass along the creek came in lush and wild, dotted with bluebells and ferns. Ducks returned. A family of turtles claimed a flat stone as their sunning spot. Fireflies danced at night, something we hadn't seen in years. But perhaps the most incredible change came from the houses, the ones closest to the old concrete trench, previously damaged, moldy, sunk, and began to stabilize. One neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, said her dehumidifier hadn't kicked on in weeks. Another found that their cracked drywall had stopped widening. It was as if the land, now breathing again, was slowly healing the wounds that Karen had left behind. And then came the letter from the county. A clean, official envelope, addressed to me personally. I opened it, heart and throat. Inside was a brief, typed note. This letter acknowledges your instrumental role in the documentation and eventual restoration of the creek previously known as Parcel 17. Based on community petition and historical evidence provided, we are pleased to inform you that the stream will be officially renamed. I paused. Read it twice. Dalton Creek, in honor of the original landowners who preserved its path and spirit. I blinked. Let the words wash over me. Not for pride, not for revenge, but because in a world where the powerful often rewrite the map, the land itself had finally spoken. And this time, it remembered our name. I brought the letter to the tree by the creek, pinned it there with a tack. Beneath the council's meeting notice, neighbors came by to read it. Some smiled, some cried, not because they knew my grandfather, but because now they finally understood what he'd protected, what we protected, and what nearly slipped away when control was handed to the wrong hands. Later that evening, I walked the bank of Dalton Creek alone. The water moved slow and steady, the moon shimmered on the ripples, and I thought not of lawsuits or concrete or Karen, but of how easy it is for a place to lose its soul, and how powerful it is when people decide to bring it back. The neighborhood was never perfect. It was never meant to be. Even before the horror, fences leaned crooked, trash cans sometimes stay out too long, and paint chipped in ways no one got around to fixing. But after everything, after the destruction, the lies, the lawsuits, the floodwaters, and the silence, perfection didn't matter anymore. What mattered was balance. Dalton Creek cut through the center of the community now, not just as a waterway, but as a reminder. Children played by its banks, stacking stones into little towers and launching paper boats under makeshift bridges. Teens painted rocks with messages like "Protect what protects you" and "Creeks remember." There was no plaque. No ceremony, only the water, always moving forward, always whispering. And sometimes that was enough. Karen's house sat empty for a year, windows dark, lawn overgrown, a ghost of granite and glass. Eventually, it was purchased, ironically, by a small nonprofit group that builds homes sustainably. They tore out the tile, treated the walls, and restructured the foundation using methods meant to work with the land, not fight it. They renamed it the Willow House, and they opened it to displaced families, people who'd lost their homes to floods in other towns, The irony wasn't lost on me. A house once ruled by control and arrogance, now sheltering those who blast everything to water. Not as punishment, but as poetry. As for me, I didn't move away. I stayed, not out of stubbornness, but because my family's roots weren't in the deed, they were in the dirt, the trees, the water. I repaired what was mine. I planted new grass. And every few weeks, I walked to the edge of the creek and placed a pebble there, just a small one. No one told me to. But something about it made sense. It was how my grandfather had marked time. A small act, repeated. Proof that someone still cared enough to notice the flow. One evening, during the full festival, a modest one, filled with potluck dishes and campfire songs, I heard a little girl ask her mom why the stream was named Jolton Creek. The mother smiled and pointed at me from across the field. That man's family, she said. They used to protect this place before it had roads, before anyone told them they couldn't. The girl looked at me. I waved. And in her eyes, I saw no HOA. No fines. No fear. Only curiosity. And wonder. And that's how I knew the story didn't end with me. Because revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's quieter. Lasting. Built not on taking back what's yours, but restoring what should never have been touched. The water moves on, but it remembers. And now, so do we.